there's just some things that aren't going to make sense for the adults that are going to make a lot of sense for the athlete. I think the biggest difference is the risk versus reward calibration, because truly the recipe is the same. We're going to work on our mobility, power, strength, conditioning. We're going to be filling those 4 buckets. But the biggest difference is when you have a group of middle schoolers that are 12 to 14 years old, 100% of them are healthy, or 95%. When you have a group of adults, everybody's got something. It's a low back, it's a shoulder, a hip labrum, chronic neck pain. That's the biggest difference, is people are coming in with a lot more baggage, right? Mike talks about the filet mignon middle schooler to the beef jerky 60-year-old adult client. Most of our adult clients are over the age of 50. So we're gonna be a lot more conservative when it comes to our adults with the athletes, but obviously still getting strong and pushing fitness as a goal. I asked Mike this question maybe 2 years ago. How similar would you like the adult program to be to the athlete program? And his answer was as similar as possible insofar as it makes sense. The biggest thing that we're able to do and why we're able to have such a high volume is that we'll have a recipe, simple exercises, basic patterns, as I mentioned, but then we have that progression regression system where we can scale. So it's just knowing what's our baseline or what's that pattern, and then being able to move up and down the spectrum. So it's like we're still gonna try to check that box for them, but in a sensible way where they're not gonna get hurt because they need to go to work the next day. Don't put something stupid in there, but make sure that we still are checking the boxes of everything that's important for people.
Hey everybody, I'm your host, Anthony Rana. Welcome to episode 413 of the Strength Coach Podcast, where we talk about relevant topics with top coaches in the fitness industry to help you become a better coach, trainer, therapist, or business owner. We are sponsored by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Just a shout out again to them. 18 years they've been supporting this show. Love those guys. Chris Barrier, thank you as always. Perform Better Summits are going on right now, guys. Long Beach as we speak, but it's not too late to sign up for Providence, August 14th to 16th. A lot of great coaches going to be there, a lot of new coaches. And it's going to be similar to last year, opening day, 3 business talks, and then Friday and Saturday, lectures and practicals, along with last year's idea of a networking room where you can go and hang with the presenters. There'll be 2 or 3 presenters in every hour in the rooms that you can hang with, ask them questions or just say hi. As always, social on Friday night. Remember, no more Sundays. I love that. So you kind of get home and settle in a little bit, kind of regroup and get ready for Monday. But you can check it all out at performbetter.com. All right. Remember, last episode, we started a new segment in conjunction with the Business for Unicorns guys. Mark Fisher, Michael Keeler, Pete Dupuis, and Ben Picard, the Business for Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play. It's not going to be on this episode, but I want to remind you, check out businessforunicorns.com. They have a ton of free resources for you. We're going to have them on next show. We're doing every other show with them. All right, today I have on Jess Tollman. Jess spearheads the adult program for both MBSC's 2 facilities, as well as MBSC Thrive. So a lot of responsibility there. I think she said in the episode, 335 adults in their programs between the 2 locations alone, never mind MBSC Thrive. So we're going to talk to her all about the key to successful adult programming and the thought process behind that programming and how it's similar or different from the athlete model, right? We're talking this is the Strength Coach Podcast. We are based in the athlete model. So I want to talk to her about that. She's going to go over coaching individuals within the group as it relates to adult programming. So let's just get on the phone with Jess Tollman. All right, guys. Now I have on Jess Tollman, strength and conditioning coach and fitness educator and consultant. She's been a key part of the team at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning since 2001. If you listen to the podcast, you've definitely heard her name. Mike talks about her occasionally when he's talking about the adult programming. So she trains clients and groups daily, but she also, so she's head of the adult programming at both of MBSC's two facilities, as well as MBSC Thrive. So some of you might not even know that there's a lot of MBSC Thrives out there. It's the franchising piece or licensing piece to MBSC. So she helps deliver functional training programs and education to hundreds of gyms across the country. She teaches CFSC levels 1 and 2. Cool thing is background as an educator, and also a mental health counselor. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And that helps her take a principled, mindful approach to coaching. Jess, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Ant. I'm glad to be here.
I don't normally do this, but we're going to throw all the bomb out there because we're going to talk about adult programming today for the most part. I just want to start out right away. What is the key for you to successful adult programming?
I'll bullet point this. Keep it simple. 2 to 3 days a week, total body, essential patterns, movements over maxes, variation without change, consistency over intensity. That's the 35,000 foot view.
Absolutely. And we'll get into some of that. We're going to get into some of that as well. And I love the consistency piece for me when you're working with adults is so important. I think I always tell people Mike said this, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but somebody asked Mike, what's the best sets and reps? And he said 3 by 52, right? 3 times a week.
Yes.
52 weeks a year. Just do that. I don't care what your sets and reps are. I don't really care what you're doing. We do care, but from that perspective, if we can get somebody in, it's an important piece. And I think that's an important piece for retention. You and I had a little conversation beforehand about retention, because I think when you focus on the bullet points you just focused on, that's now how we keep people, because adults are different from the regular athlete. And that's really where I wanted to get you on. I want to talk about your thought process with adult programming because of the environment you're in. So you're at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, famous for coaching athletes. People think of MBSC as training some of the best hockey players, some of the best baseball players in the world, football players. Mike was instrumental in kind of originally doing combine training. And I think Mike has said, I think the number was, your adult population now at MBSC is like up to about 70% of your right?
That might be right. I know for between Middleton and Woburn, we have roughly 335 group class clients. So that's not even counting personal training. So that's pretty big.
Wow. That's crazy. So what's the thought process for you? You mentioned some of these bullet points. So, when we look at the athlete model, and I was telling you earlier that there was a while back, 20 years ago, probably when training was really starting to change. People would talk about training kids and they're like, look, you cannot treat kids like just mini adults. It doesn't work like that. So I don't think you can treat adults, even if they're like I have golfers and some hockey players, but that are older. You can't treat them like you would treat a 17 to 25-year-old athlete, elite athlete. And you're getting a lot of that kind of information into your head from, we're here at MBSC. So talk to me about your thought process, how you have to approach your adult programming at MBSC.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is the risk versus reward calibration, right? We talk about that a lot because truly the recipe is the same. Right? We're going to work on our mobility, power, strength, conditioning. We're going to be filling those 4 buckets. But the biggest difference is when you have a group of middle schoolers that are 12 to 14 years old, 100% of them are healthy, right? Or 95%. When you have a group of adults, everybody's got something, right? It's a low back, it's a shoulder, it's a hip labrum, it's, chronic neck pain. So that's the biggest difference is people are coming in with a lot more baggage, right? Mike talks about the filet mignon middle schooler to the beef jerky 60-year-old adult client. Most of our adult clients are over the age of 50, right? Which is actually a little different than, as we mentioned, MBSC Thrive, where that might be more around 40. So we're going to be a lot more conservative when it comes to our adults with the athletes, but obviously still getting strong and pushing fitness as a goal. So when I asked Mike this question maybe 2 years ago, I said, Mike, how similar would you like the adult program to be to the athlete program? And his answer was as similar as possible insofar as it makes sense. And what do we mean by that? Is, that's we can kind of use the athlete program as the ideal, but then you have to think, who am I programming for? Right? Because if you have, the Winchester mom who hasn't been in a gym before come in versus you have, the senior captain of the hockey team, those programs should look very different. The biggest thing that we're able to do and why we're able to have such a high volume is that we'll have a recipe, simple exercises, basic patterns, as I mentioned, but then we have that progression regression system where we can scale things. So it means that, when it's goblet squat, we're going to have, Chris, who's former, soccer player, and he's in his early 30s, he can be doing, 20 kgs front squat, kettlebell front rack squat, right? Versus that brand new mom client who comes in, who's intimidated, she's nervous, she's got some aching knee pain, maybe she's a runner in the past, squat press out, or maybe it's a Spanish squat, or maybe it's a wall sit. So it's just knowing what's our baseline or what's that pattern, and then being able to move up and down the spectrum. And then
Absolutely.
certainly, as far as just to go back to, you mentioned
Yeah.
athletes versus adults, there's just some things that aren't going to make sense for the adults that are going to make a lot of sense for the athlete. So a really simple example would be when it comes to explosive power. Hang cleans make a lot of sense. Dumbbell snatch make a lot of sense, right? When it comes to our adults, absolutely not, right? It's going to be more kettlebell swing, box jump, maybe some lightly loaded jumps. So it's like we're still going to try to check that box for them, but in a sensible way where they're not going to get hurt because they need to go to work the next day. They spend a lot of time sitting, right? It's just, we gotta, it's kind of, don't put something stupid in there, but make sure that we still are checking the boxes of everything that's important for people.
Yeah, I think that's a really important key. First of all, good. I like that you mentioned risk reward because Mike hasn't really talked about that as much lately, but that was always what Mike was talking about. And honestly, I think it was because of when CrossFit was really popular,
Mm,
there was always that conversation because when CrossFit was becoming popular in 2009 or 10, and there was this, who else was becoming popular? Like the Gray Cooks of the world. And they were starting to collide. Like, you're doing too much corrective, you're doing too much crazy
mm,
shit. Right.
yeah,
So there was that. Mike's thing was that he wanted to be more in the middle. Like, how do we help these guys, get them stronger, get them faster, get them better at their sport, but at the same time, keep them healthy, right? Because there's different spectrums of the elite athlete too. The NHL players that are in their 30s that are just trying for that last contract or just want to ride out that they don't want to get hurt.
yeah.
There's no way they can get hurt in gym. That would be ridiculous, right? So I like the way you brought that up because when you talked about it, everybody's hurt. The adult, from the adult perspective, so
Mhm.
many people are hurt. Those regressions, lateralizations, they're so important to understand because there's always something you can do. I want to ask you though, when I asked Kevin Carr, because this is related, when I asked Kevin Carr about what's your superpower, one of the things he said is coaching individuals in a group. Okay. First of all, define group, what your groups are, but how do you do that when you have 10 people in a group and kind of keeping track or making sure that what they're doing isn't going they're not going to get hurt or they're not going to look to the side and say, well, that she's doing it or I can do this too. So talk to me about the challenge with that.
Mm. Yeah, so define a group would be, on average, would be 6 to 10 people, maybe slightly less, slightly more,
Yeah.
depending on
Yep.
people's schedules. Um, and yeah, I think individualizing within a group is, to me, one of the most fun parts of the job because you get to really coach. Talking to people is great, and that's obviously a big part of what we do. But you really get to kind of bounce around and be like, okay, hey, like, Allie, let's, turn the split squat into a one leg squat because she really wants to push it. And then, oh, hey, like we're going to do split squat ISO because that's going to help you develop quad strength, but not aggravate the knee arthritis that Liz is dealing with, for example. So a lot of it is just, you have your exercise, but that's the great thing about being at MBSC is you understand the system we have, or if you take the CFSC and you just know what the different options are. And a lot of it's just problem solving, right? Is, everyone wants to get fit and strong. And I'll always say, like, to a new client coming in, it's like, just if something doesn't feel great, let me know, because there's nothing we have to do, right? Like, say it's a front plank, but they have a shoulder issue. Like, I don't care about a front plank. I care that you get an anti-extension core in. So let's do a dead bug. Let's do a hollow hold, right? So it's just, that's where the thinking categorically comes in. And this is something we're really big on. I talked about this a lot in my spring seminar presentation. I told everybody, I said, if you take one thing away about adult programming, is think categorically. So that's when I was talking about those essential patterns, right? And, majority of the folks listening are probably familiar, right? But, right, knee dominant, lower, hip dominant, lower, upper push, upper pull, rotational core, anti-rotation core, right? Is making sure we get those boxes checked, we're getting our work done, but there are so many ways we can do it, right? We're going to try to find like the way that is sensible, simple, logistically feasible. But I think just framing it for our coaches, for ourselves, in terms of, we have boxes to check, but there's a lot of ways we can do it. And generally speaking, you're using, hey, whatever's on the sheet, whatever's on the board, that's kind of the anchor exercise. And we're thinking, how can I stay as close to that as possible? But you will also have some people in the group where their trainable menu is pretty limited, right? And then it becomes like less about the regression and it's more, what can this person do, right? So I think just framing it in terms of finding things that people can do that feel good, trying to be as close to the category of the given exercise, and then just thinking of yourself, I'm just trying to solve a problem. And that becomes fun. That's engaging. And that's where you get to, really use your brain on the floor and kind of bounce around between people.
100%. How are you teaching coaches to kind of remember all of that piece? So I have 10 people in the group. I got, all these people. Now we know after a while, cool. I know Anthony's got his left elbow's hurting him. And I have to be careful with that left side or his right shoulder. And so I have to make sure we're doing this. But keeping track of that all right, you're not training all 335 of your adult clients, but it's still, you're training. If you did 5 sessions a day only, you'd have 50 to 60 people. So how are you kind of making sure? And then if you're not there and now I'm subbing for you, how do I know about Anthony's left elbow? So talk to me about how because you're managing all this with your coaches.
Yeah, no, good question. A couple thoughts there is one, one great thing about MBSC is our coach retention rate is really high, which means that our coaches have a relatively high familiarity with the client base. And also coaching an adult group would be a slightly higher standard, right? So the brand new coach who's just finished the internship or is fresh out of college, like, they do have to achieve a relatively high bar to cover an adult group. So that's one thing that helps us, is that our coaches are around, they get to know people, and we keep the bar relatively high. The other thing would be, we often will talk about this or remind in staff meeting, is, if there's someone who you don't know in your group, because maybe they usually come at the 5 a.m., but they have the day off, so they're in your noon class, ask them, like always ask, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, and I just like, I try to phrase it, always pretty neutrally or positively is best. Like, hey, do you have any, aches, pains, injuries, anything like that going on? And just a, casual question after I ask them, their name, where they're from. And people will tell you if you ask, right? And then, sometimes just having the line of, yeah, if anything doesn't feel good, just let me know. If you don't tell me, I won't know, but please do tell me. And then as far as keeping it simple for our coaches to make those adjustments and know, hey, what's next if this doesn't work. The first way we do it is on the board on our program sheet that we hand out, in red underneath the exercise of that given block, is the regression. So it would be, if it's a goblet split squat, there might be a body weight split squat. Now that's kind of the classic one. So it won't necessarily, of course, you're not going to put on every
Yeah.
regression possible, because people still need to be able to read it. But that's where the Mike's investment in the continuing education of the staff is really important, right? That if we see something that we feel like people are missing, or we're missing, right? That's something we want to make sure we go over as a group. Likewise, whenever we put out a new program, when I email it out to the staff, if there's any new exercises, there's going to be an exercise demonstration video along with some notes, so that we can make sure we're all on the same page. And then if there are any key points, we'll make sure that we go over that in staff meetings. So like here, for an example, our as far as like calculating that risk reward and making sure we're all on the same page, something that recently came up prior to the summer, as our athletes are doing more depth drops, and so we're using higher plyo boxes for that, those sometimes get left out. And then you have adults who are trying to jump on the 30-inch boxes, and their knees are by their neck when they're landing on it. And just, seeing that happen, multiple times, it's like, that's a conversation point. We got to talk about that, because if it's out, sometimes the adults are just like the middle school boys, where, right, the 24-inch hurdles are out, and doesn't matter if they're, 4 foot, they're going to try to jump over it. So just make sure that nothing above 24, that let's understand our principle is, hey, we're trying to take away the landing force there. So the continuing education goes along with that.
And this is along the lines too. This is why it's important, and the CSFC is so important, because of the progressions, regressions, lateralizations. You talked about one of your bullet points. I forget how you said it was, variety with consistency. What was it called?
Yeah, it was a variation without change.
Variation without change. Because again, when one of the superpowers Kevin Carr talked about with you was, you're able to put variety into the programs in a way that challenges the clients while still making it manageable with the 10 people. Can you just talk about that piece of it and give us an example of variety with change? Because sometimes people think, oh, variety means I need to, get a completely different piece of equipment out, or do something different, and it doesn't really mean that. So talk about what that means.
It goes back to that thinking categorically idea, where the categories never change, but what we plug in can. So here's a recent example is, Mike and I had continued, because he's training his, who I think he's talked about on the podcast, his friend Eric, who's had some like low back pain and knee stuff as well. And I deal with some clients with the same, and is, the value of quadruped for shoulder stability, or, engaging core, all of that good stuff. And so it was messing around with just some different pulling variations as well, because it's kind of dumbbell row, it's a cable pull, it's a ring row. We kind of cycle through those.
Yeah.
So then we're just kind of thinking, well, what about like a quadruped pull? Right. And it's not like crazy innovative. So just, if you can imagine being in an all fours position, with the cable or band right in front of you, and just doing a pull. So you're right on 3 points of contact and doing a row from there. Really, that's it's both like an anti-rotation, anti-extension core, and like not really like kind of a pull, but it's more for like that kind of perturbation type of a thing.
Yeah.
And that like, it's not that different from our vertical pull. It's not that different from another thing, but hey, that hadn't been in the MBSC program before. But that's where the fact that we have training principles in addition to the progression regression sheet matters, right? Like, we're not just going to do stuff just because it's hard, right? Or just because it's different. Like, we're not going to just do like a bicep curl to an overhead press just for variety's sake, because like, I don't like, what box is that really checking for us? Versus, hey, like, it'll be helpful to get our adults doing a little more pulls overhead. We don't do a lot of pressing overhead, work on that mobility and give them a little more core variety. And for us, it's also it's to keep them engaged, because that's another big difference between adults and athletes, as I'm sure you deal with, is the adults those are your year-round clients. And that's why more businesses, including us, are really focused on the adult market, because the kids come and go with the seasons, right? They're in lacrosse season now, and they're playing 7 days a week. So where's the time for the gym? There should be time, but with youth sports right now. There really isn't. But the adults, like this is their extracurricular. So the most, like you said, like the most important rep range, right, is that you keep showing up. You could say
Yeah.
the most important exercise they do is the door handle pull, right? Because
Yes.
that means they are coming. So part of that is making it engaging, but also if we like are really reinventing the wheel every month, it's too much variety, right? You can't make progress if suddenly there's no squats in the program and you're only doing hinges. Like that doesn't make sense. We always want to make sure we have knee dominant, hip dominant, a mix, mostly unilateral, but still getting some of those bilaterals in there. Occasionally we'll take something out and then put it back in for the sake of variety. Sometimes it has to do, and it also has to do with thinking of what's our logistical flow at the time. So a good example would be when it comes time for summer and right from 5 a.m. in the morning to 9 p.m. at night, groups every 15 minutes. And there's athletes, adults, middle schoolers, 4-day group, 2-day group, right? It's everything. The logistics need to be really tight. So there's less creativity in the adult program. It's
Yeah.
more bread and butter by nature. And it makes sense because our focus is going to be more on those athletes in the summer. It is a bigger part of the revenue too. But that said, what about the 3 months leading into the summer? That spring, which is probably our lightest athlete time since we have really big hockey and lacrosse population. That's when we can get a little more creative. So landmines in the front because we're not worried about transitioning from hang cleans to landmine and that being a pain to put it in and out. So we're going to do some landmine reverse lunges. We'll do front squat to press, lateral squat or landmine SLDL. We'll mix sleds in to our power circuit, like a light sled run, not a, super heavy sled slog,
Yeah.
but that's a power that is sensible, right? Like if they're not doing a, Olympic snatch or anything, but they're moving in a gait pattern at, a moderate load, right? And the squat to press, like Mike phrased it so well in a staff meeting. He's like, when someone asked, is that a power exercise? He goes, it's a power-ish exercise. Because again, we still want to work on a little combination coordination move with that one, but then like bring it down slow. And that's just managing the risk versus reward. So also it's like we are willing, and like this is something that I really appreciate about our culture, is we're willing to try things if there's a good reason for it, right? If there's a rationale for it.
You talked about this idea about progress, right?
Hmm.
And why that's obviously super important. Talk to me about tracking. I told you beforehand, my wife is at a gym right now. Great gym, metabolic, right? Because I had the owner of that on the show. We talked about, I thought this could be a good thing for my wife. And they happen to be opening one in my neighborhood a couple months later. So I did it for a couple months with her to get her started. And now she's doing it. She loves it. But she actually came back today. I was like, I'm just really frustrated. They have rows. So the row on the left is the lightest row. They set the weights up beforehand, and you move over, and you got the heavier weights. And she's like, I don't feel like I can't move out of this row. Right. I'm not getting stronger. But I said, the part of the problem is you're not tracking. They don't track the weights there. So she's not sitting there writing it down. It's pretty intense, et cetera. How do you guys deal with that? Like tracking and because you know how people are too. They're like, they don't know what weights they're using
Hmm.
half the time. And they just, Jess, what am I using? So how do you deal with that and kind of teaching them, hey, you are progressing, you are getting stronger. How do you guys deal with that if you're not tracking specifically all of your people in a group?
It depends a little bit on the client and their level of engagement. Like Mike talks about the different type of clients, right? And the vast majority of our clients are those check the box people where like they know it's good for them. They're like
Yeah.
not necessarily a gym rat, right? But
Yeah.
they like coming and they know it's good for them, right? Um, we do have a number of clients though who are like they're super bought into what we're doing. Like they understand that it's very thoughtful, and they are motivated to make progress. Megan Lynch, who's one of our coaches, who's awesome. She helps me with just some of the logistics of the adult program, like making the boards, and she'll also make sheets for the adults where they can write in their weights and like they have their own folder for it. So for those folks who are really dialed in, they are writing in their weights and tracking and across the scheme. So that's absolutely available for all of our adults. It is still a minority of people who do that. So part of how we help people make progress, and it does depend on what their level of engagement is, because we can't lift the weights for them, of course. But that is where we're going to play with things like our rep scheme to help nudge people along. So for example, I believe it was maybe last fall, just as an example, we messed around with doing 1 month of a higher rep scheme, like more like 10s and 12s. And then another month where we did lower rep scheme, more like 5s or 6s. And that's really about as high or as low as we're going to go. Like we kind of live in that 5 to 12 range.
Yeah.
But is us, as programmers having, chatting with the staff, hey, here's a thought process behind this, is like we're trying to push volume a little bit here. But really even more so than that, next month, we want people to pick up a slightly heavier weight. And another thing, just equipment wise, is up to 50 pounds, is we have those dumbbells in 2.5 pound increments. So it does allow for folks to make those little jumps especially if they're intimidated by,
Yep.
Going from 30 to 35 might seem like a huge, it's just 32.5, no big deal. But is just us playing with those schemes and then communicating our intentions to the client. Say, okay, guys, so last month we were swinging the kettlebells for 10 reps. Notice it's only 6 right now. So on your second set, consider grabbing a kettlebell that's 4 kgs heavier. And granted, on a swing, we're not super concerned with the load, so perhaps not the best example, but say bench press
Yeah.
or a split squat might be a better one. And another strategy we've played with and still on the rep schemes is doing something like a descending ladder, so of reps. So for example, set 1 is 10, that's easy. Set 2 is 8, that's medium, and set 3 is 6. That should be your hard set. For our athletes, we do it as an 8-6-4. Right? But a slightly higher rep scheme. And I think we've even done like 9-7-5 with the adults. We don't do 4s usually. We wouldn't really do that. Right. But it's just, again, it's the same ideas. The principles are the same, but it's just scaled in a way that makes sense from a volume and intensity and risk reward standpoint for the adult client.
Yeah, 100%. I try to tell and it's only 3 people, and I do track for them. Like I actually have a clipboard and I have their names and the exercise, but I tell them, look, you have to tell me right now. We're doing 8 reps. If you could do 12, I need you to go up. I can't always determine that. And but I'll bust them on it because sometimes I'd be like the last set. I'm like, guys, we're going to go to failure on this last set. And like, how many did you do? 25. I'm like, you did 25? Really? You did 25. So, and you're still at that weight. Like, you need to go up in weight. So, like, that will they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I can't believe I did that. Right. So, I think it's funny that, it is tough for me. It's not why I was asking you, probably selfishly, like, hey, if I get a couple more people, how are you guys doing it? Because I don't have them do it myself. And I'm in a big gym. I'm in Lifetime. So I'm not, my logistics are completely different. I have to kind of go by, well, how do I make this work at 9:30 when there's hundreds of people in here and there's not, people are sitting on one bench for half an hour. Right. So, it does become a little bit different, but, I want to get into your background a little bit from the mental health counselor piece. I think it's really important. I told you I grew up, I did grow up in kind of an alcoholic, a little bit of violent family. And they say children of alcoholics will be very observant because you're always looking, what's the mood going to be or what's going on right there. But then the key for me was working in the bar business for the next 18 years, from 18 to 36. So I feel like I can read people pretty easily. And that's kind of been a little bit of my superpower. People have told me that, like, oh yeah, how did you know I wasn't feeling this way or that way? Or, so I'm able to kind of maneuver around what I always say it's about them. This session is always about them. I want them to leave feeling better than when they came in. As a mental health counselor, like how would you say that's helped you be a better coach?
Yeah, it's been pretty massive. I mean, I used to be kind of more insecure that I didn't have the, you know, exercise physiology background, or didn't start the internship when I was 19. I did the internship when I was 27. Um, but now it's really been a boon for me having that more psychology and education type background, because so much of what we do is relational, and is matching the program to where someone is on that given day. So is if someone is, coming back from vacation, or you can kind of tell they've been out of it, like whatever, right? Their body language, like you said, just you're kind of picking up what
Yeah.
they're putting down, and maybe you're asking them a question or two to suss that out. And you're kind of saying like this is gonna be kind of like a get back into it workout. How does that sound? You know what I mean? And like let's think like, I want you to be
Love
a
it.
kind of like a 6 out of 10 intensity for most things, roughly. How does that sound? Like, and so used to kind of making it a conversation always to try to give them agency. Um, and that makes a big difference. So I think it's, just like you said, being observant of how they're showing up for a given session. I think being something like a big passion of mine is sort of supporting the intimidated client, whether it's a kid, whether it's an adult who is just starting at the gym, right? Because it's, at any facility, but especially ours, right? Over 20,000 square feet, you see all these jerseys on the wall, these like huge hulking racks. Like, it's so
Yeah.
intimidating. I was so intimidated when I walked in as a 27-year-old woman. I can't imagine what an 11-year-old girl, or like the like non-athlete mom, or whoever it is, or like the desk worker guy. It doesn't matter. Like that's so intimidating to just walk in through the door. So it's just trying to like, I don't know, lower the threshold for that person, and just I really enjoy. I had a new adult in my class, and she was, I wouldn't say she was intimidated or anything, but she was like, I thought when my partner told me I should do boils, I thought, it's like, I can't do boils. Like, that's for athletes. It's too much. And she goes, her partner goes, no, you don't understand. Like, it's really like, they will, like, the workout is for everybody. Like, they'll figure out what makes sense for you. And by the time we were in pod 3 by the Kaisers, and starting to wrap shit, she was like, that was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like, that was fine. Um,
Yeah.
and something that I like to talk about a lot, and kind of got this concept a bit from David Gray, just as far as how you frame people starting out at the gym, is if we think of progress, if you can imagine like an XY axis, and that initial, like, say, first 2 to 3 months, is it's not going to be that linear line. It's going to be more that what would look like that exponential growth line, right? Where it starts building slow, right? You're just laying that foundation for the house, but then, you learn the movement patterns, right? You understand what we're doing, the positions you're supposed to be, the actions, how it's supposed to feel. You build that base, and then you start adding a little weight and getting more confident and feeling competent at what you're doing. So I think painting that initial picture for people, and the idea of, I don't want your first workout to be a killer. I want you to come back, right? Like, we always say, like, I don't want you to feel like you got hit by a bus tomorrow. I want you to wake up and feel like I did something yesterday,
Yeah.
right? And then oftentimes, you mentioned, we've been talking about the observation piece, is you can, when you ask somebody a question, you can tell in the first 2 seconds based on their reaction what the right answer is. So oftentimes, like you ask, because it's how you're going to push people, is I'm using two things: is one, my observation, and two, your feedback. Right. Like, I know how intense it looks, but right, like, some people like don't, like, they show it more than others. Right. So I'm often asked, like, hey, how was that set? Right. And then, like, I might say, like, you can say something like, right, easy, medium, hard, or use the numbers. But sometimes you say, like, what do you think about going up? Or do you think we should stay? Or whatever. And just in that first 2 seconds, if you say go up and they hesitate, like, probably not. Right. But if you say, like, should we stay? And they're like, and then they're like, they may want to go up, or they, whatever it is, but just is, I think sometimes is using people's nonverbals in our kind of curiosity questions. Like, oftentimes you will find the answer in their reaction, if you're getting curious about them.
Absolutely. It's funny. We just talked to Mike. I even posted that clip on Instagram where it was this power of observation where, hey, how was that how was that bench press or whatever? And it's like, yeah, no, it's been, and they're rubbing their shoulder. No, it's fine. It's fine. And, and then they're walking around. You're like, okay, that wasn't fine. Right. So we have to kind of make sure that we're doing that. And I think, those are great points like about the observation piece. I love that you said, you talked about the get back into it workout. I do that so much because I know when they're coming back, they're a little worried about it. They haven't done anything. They go in with grand plans sometimes, right?
Right.
We're like, oh yeah, no, the hotel has a gym and we're going to be doing this and we're going to be doing that. Then it's like, oh man, we didn't do anything. But they had a great time and that's all that really mattered. And I think giving them that permission to kind of go easy, they
Yeah.
think that we're always going to be just, this hardcore, oh, just gonna kill me today, or they're gonna just gonna be disappointed in me or whatever. And I think over time, and I was talking to you earlier about retention, one of the things that I think at my gym, they were asking me, how is your retention so high? And I said the consistent message is really important. So I think the progressions and regressions go along with that, right? But it's also about the 3x52 going with that again, but it's always the language for me as well, that
Yeah.
consistent message. I deliver on what I originally sold them, right? I remind them why we're doing things. I talk about longevity and health span a lot and transferring what we're doing in the gym to the everyday activities. And my programming reflects that, right? And I don't make a big deal about a workout, right? I make a big deal about coming in and being consistent. And hey, it's going to be an undulated. We're on a roller coaster here. Some days it's going to be lower,
Mhm.
some days it's going to be higher. It's okay. Like reminding them. So I think giving people permission to have those bad days or not feeling it or not wanting to come in is okay. Because then they want to come in more. That's my experience,
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah. Cause like you just, you have clients who know that they can show up if they're not feeling great and you're not going to kill them because you didn't last time.
Yeah.
Because it was a dumbbell row and their back's bugging them and you made it a light cable row for them, right? It just like simple stuff and it is kind of like, it's Pete Bright, like the big strength coach, whatever, obviously that's not me, but like, is if the coach is giving you permission to just take it a little easy, like they can take the pressure off themselves. It's like one of my former roommates is an arborist, right? He works on trees. And I had this tree I needed looking at, and he's right, super nature guy, and he's like, yeah, that tree, it looks like it might get close to your house coming down. You may want to cut it down. And I'm like, well, okay, like the tree guy's telling me I should cut down my tree. Okay, because I felt really bad. I'm like, it's nature. It's like,
Yeah.
you want to protect the environment, all that stuff. But I'm like, okay, the tree guy's telling me this tree shouldn't be around, right? So it's like the strength coach taking off the pressure and just letting the framework even before you get in the weight room. Like we checking in as we're foam rolling and stretching, or I really like to use those moments when we're transitioning from one area to another to have those slightly more one-to-one moments with people because I know as like I'm super social, but I am introverted. I know that I prefer to talk to people more one-on-one, and that's when I'm going to be like most real versus with an audience of 9 other people around. So like I may ask someone something that's like a tiny bit more personal or even just like a quick check-in, like as we're going to put foam rollers away because they don't have an audience. So I also find like sometimes it's and with the athletes too, especially like if you have, like the guy who's with his friends and doesn't want to like, look weak. Not that it's weak to talk about how you are, like that's
Sure.
not what it is. But like I will try to just like ask him about his ankle when when his buddy's a little distracted or whatever, because you're just going to get a
Yeah.
more honest answer, right? So yeah, using those in between moments is like, hey, how'd you feel after the last workout? And just as a general barometer for newer clients coming in too, is like I don't want the workout to be above a 7 out of 10 challenge. Like then I feel like we kind of overshot. Or if because I've had this happen with clients or personal training clients, because people are generally speaking really deconditioned when they come in. And like the way our setup is, like the workout, it's very dense. And there's 9 exercises in that strength block. Granted, there's filler, some are less or more intense than others, but it is a lot if you're going sort of couch to boils. So that is why we always say still only 2 sets. But I've had people who are, I checked in with one of my personal training clients, former colleague of mine, who was hopping in the groups after, and I just was walking by, checked in with her, and she was finishing up pod 2. And I said, hey, like, where are you at right now, intensity wise? Scale 1 to 10. And she told me she was at an 8. I don't want her to go and do 3 more exercises and condition, because then she's going to be at a 12 out of 10 after her first workout. So I said, hey, why don't you finish up this row and call it a day? That was a great first group workout. And she that was last week. She came back for another group workout Monday. And this is that intimidated person who's not a gym rat, but she's coming back, right? Because we didn't kill her. That's the big thing. Don't kill
Yeah.
people.
Love it. Do you have a system for checking in? Like if you have 10 people, you're like, hey, I need to make sure I need a touch point. I need 2 touch points with each person. I need to, I'm going to go up to them and talk about that, maybe this or that, or, because, you at least get something with each person individually. Are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you're having at least a moment with everybody, whether it's like a social check-in, more of a coaching point, modification, injury, whatever it is. It's the same principle as, right, Mike talks about, every kid should hear their name once a session, get praised once a session, like a fist bump once a session, whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
everyone should feel seen, right? Like you want everyone to feel recognized, right? And that's another reason people keep coming back. That's a reason I stay at MBSC is I enjoy the culture. I like being there. Also like I'm a movement nerd, but I like the people I'm around. And the adults they'll keep coming because they get good results, but because they like you.
We talked a little bit about your philosophy of like training for quality of life. My philosophy is same idea, right? We're obviously we're influenced by the same systems.
Yes.
Move well, get strong, fit. We have a focus on those things, but it's not always very sexy to sell that, right? And that's where I was talking about having that consistent message, because the more you do that, the more they're going to buy in. Talk to me a little bit about that piece of it. It's hard to sell sometimes, or, you want to retain these people when you're not, because you're not always selling. That's not your job. Your
Yeah.
job isn't to sell. Your job is to retention, really. So, but sometimes people might be like, well, I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm progressing or whatever. And even though they might be, and they don't even realize it. How do you deal with that?
I think it has to do with like again, to make the parallel to athletics, right? Mike talks about like talking sport or framing and given exercise in terms that are make the athlete understand it. Like if you're doing a side toss, you're going to say it related to baseball if it's a baseball player, a slap shot if it's hockey, whatever, right? It's kind of the same for training where whatever like that, you just have to find what matters to that person outside of the gym, because it's usually a reason outside the gym, right? 99%
Yes.
of the time that brought them there. And then you're framing whatever you're doing in terms of that. So I'll take the side toss, for example, right? I know you train, golfers, right? Like obviously
Mm-hmm.
this is going to help with your golf game, right? But what if they don't care about golf? What if they're more of like that kind of chronic pain person who just wants to feel better? Like then you say like the way your hips are moving in this side toss, like, like this is great hip mobility for you, right? If they're like a super nerd, you can see, hey, this you're getting hip internal rotation and external rotation in that side toss. If they don't care about that, we are not talking about that, right? Because like you said, it's their workout. It's just framing things in terms that matter to them, right? If they care about going on, hiking the Dolomites with their kids, that's why we're doing split squats, right? If they care
Yeah.
about having a nice ass, that's why we're doing split squats.
Yeah.
And both are true. I'm not lying to you at all. But I am framing it in terms that matter to you and keep you coming back and also keep you feeling like this is your program.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example I use for a med ball slam, for example, with golfers. And they'll say, well, why do I need to do this? Like, this doesn't look like the golf swing at all. I'm like, but here's what you were doing earlier. You were just taking the ball and using your arms. Then what did we get you to do? Or you started doing, when I said break the ball, what did you do? You had a little squat, you jumped you had a little, on your tippy toes. I don't say triple extension to them, but triple
Sure.
extension. And then you slammed it to break it down. That's a sequence. What is the golf swing? The golf swing is a sequence. So we're working on sequencing even though we're not working on rotation. So I love that point that you make. You have to figure out, and this is what's so important. When Mike worked for the Red Sox, I'm not sure if you heard this story, but one of the first year, he didn't really change anything about programming. Before he got to training camp, he got the media guide, found out who their kids were, what their wives' names were, maybe some of their interests, right? In that media guy, because it'll tell them. And I think that's really important, like why you need a media guide for your clients, almost like remember, hey,
Hmm.
this one plays golf. That one loves pickleball. This one has some kids. This one's a grandma. I even used a church example. Believe it or not, I have a woman who's really religious, and she used the word genuflect. So if anybody doesn't know what a genuflect is, it's really like just like a split squat. So when you get to the pew in church, you kneel down, and they call it a genuflect, right? So I didn't call them split squats. I said, let's do 5 genuflects in each leg, right? So you're relating
That's
it
awesome.
to that person, right?
That's such a good example.
Yeah. So it's really important to find those things out. But I want to just kind of finish up the next few minutes with your personal experience about you weren't doing this. You didn't get into this till you're 27. You had a completely different industry. Talk to us about how you kind of transitioned and what were some of the important things that you did to be so successful. And it's not easy to get where you're at. You have a lot of competition. When you go to those internships at MBSC, you are fighting, really, they're your competition as well, right? Even if we don't look at it like that, but somebody's got to get hired from that group, right? And then you advanced. You're head of adult programming there. You're doing a lot of different things for MBSC. So let's talk about that career path.
Yeah, no, I'm so from the kind of I studied social sciences, liberal arts background. I knew I wanted to work more so with people than computers, and I wanted to do something sort of helpful. That was my general framework. So that led me to the more mental health side of things. Pandemic hit. I'd already gotten into graduate school for social work. I was going to move to Philly, go to UPenn, but I wasn't going to do that online during the pandemic. And I knew I wanted to combine the mental health and fitness aspects, like, because I knew they were just mutually reinforcing. And from my experience, working at McLean Hospital and in that space, that was just massively missing. Like there were so many good things happening, but some of that low-hanging physical health fruit that was just not being picked. So I said, hey, this is a real inroads that we can do to help people. So I just dove in. I was training my friends in parks. I was training my uncle and aunt in South Africa over Zoom for like,
Did you get
$5.
certified? I mean, as a trainer or
Yeah, I did.
no?
I did the NASM CPT thing,
When?
and frankly, I did that like, I guess that was what 2020,
Okay.
um, and just online. And frankly, then I said, okay, now I can get back to learning, just because like those certifications are not terribly robust. Like not hating or anything, just
Yeah,
like it wasn't practical.
totally.
And so then I was just I asked the very few people who I knew who were in the industry. I said, what should I do? Like, I have a different degree. I do like school, but do I need to go back and do another 4-year degree? That seems like a lot. And they really advocated for me. They said, only really if you want to work in college sports, do you need that kind of a background? Um, Other than that, it's really on your chops, your work output, your reputation. They said do an internship. So I got a couple recommended to me. I was like floored that I hadn't heard of Mike Boyles because I grew up in Boston. So first of all, I was kind of pissed because I knew I would have been a better athlete if I had trained like that.
What did you play?
Um, I played soccer. I was a
Okay.
goalkeeper.
Okay.
So yeah, so I had an athletic background. I'd gotten into training like when some of the sort of I had some neck shoulder pain, probably as a result of smashing myself against the ground for many years. So that took me from like a personal interest like into kind of PRI and some of because those avenues helped me. So
Sure.
like and that was that was great coming into vogue more in like the mid 2010s and things like that. So I had the benefit of working with a coach who was attuned to that kind of thing, and that also got me to first realize how intentional training could be. Because like my perception of a coach had either been like, kind of stereotypical, like the big football guy, or like the sort of cheerleader spin class instructor, which isn't
Yeah.
reality. Those were my stereotypes, but I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
that's just not me. Like I'm a more like thoughtful person, and it's like I'm not going to be like the rah rah person. Um, and so I saw that there's a way you could do that. And then at the internship, like I was super nervous going in. Like I was like, I remember reading all the MBSC bios of coaches and being like, wow, like, look at Pat's background, like look at what Craig has done. Look at Dan. And I'm like, oh man, I'm like so bottom of the barrel here. Like, we'll see how this goes. And then I just really threw myself into it and just I took the perspective of like I'm making a career change and I need to learn. Like I need to learn as much as possible. And although I've read and I've practiced on myself and I've worked with like I wanted to go to like the Mecca, right? I want to go to the source and I just want to be observant. I want to learn. I want to identify the people who I think are doing a great job. I want to shadow them. I want to be useful to them. I want to help them. Um, and was just trying to go in with that attitude. I was so anxious, but like something that helped me from a framework perspective and like it's whether people are making career changes, there's a lot of people who do that in fitness, or whether people are young and coming up. There's nerves and things that come in. One thing that really helped me was saying like, hey, if I'm thinking of how I'm coming across, like I'm not focused on them. Like now it's becoming about like what's my performance like during this session,
Yeah.
so I tried to just really get curious. If anyone is interested in sort of psychology as it relates to coaching, looking into motivational interviewing. Like if you just Google that phrase, or there's like a lot of good books and things on it. There's a sort of workbook called Coaching Psychology that I've run through. It's really really a good one. But yeah, it's just kind of taking like anyway, that's I guess the mental health piece coming in, but was just I needed to take the focus off of me. And then I'm a really strong believer in a kind of apprenticeship type model or approach to careers. Even when I was in the mental health space, like my perspective was, yeah, I'm going to change the sheets on the bed. I'm going to help the kid who's crying on the floor. I'm going to whatever it is, because if you ever want to be the person who's running the place or is coordinate whatever it is, like you should know what that's like, and you should know what the people in that situation are going through. And I feel the same way about coaching. Like you are not above coaching a middle school group. I still cover those groups, and that's great because you become a better coach doing that, and the kids are awesome sometimes. But um, but yeah, it's just like that's what's great about MBSC, about internships. It's like, you know, yeah, you're not getting paid, and that's, not amazing, but also like you learn so much. And at the beginning you are getting way more than you're giving, right? And by the end you may be giving more, and that's okay, right? But it's just playing the long game a bit. And Mike's good at talking about this, and I fall into it. It's like you're kind of right. You're young and you're ambitious, and you're like, what's the next step? Like, what's the next thing? But for me, I really have felt it's like, what is that at MBSC? Because I want to be where my feet are, and I really want to put myself in a position where I can be influenced by like the best people. And I'm not just saying like the smartest people, but like people who are good people and who are like in it for the right reasons and who care about each other. We may not agree on everything, but where it's just a good place to be. So I really think it's like if you're either making a career change or getting into the industry, is like just to put in some time. Like it's okay if you sort of like, you are the intern taking out the trash at the end of the night. It's like it's fine. Like Dan did that. He still does that. And now he owns the gym. Like I still remember my first staff party and a trash bucket was full and Mike took it out. Like Mike Boyle, who's owns a place and has been doing this for 40 plus years. And
Yeah.
like that will always stick with me because he wasn't above that in like the same way that I would hope someone wasn't above changing the bed sheets at McLean because that's what needed to happen. So that really has stuck with me.
Awesome. I think I brought this up before on the show, I think, where very similar, like when I was running bars, I would always, on a busy night, I'm picking up glasses, right? I had three busboys in the bar, and I'm finding spots where people would leave a glass by and I was responsible for buying new glasses, so I want to make sure. But still,
Yes.
the busboys would see that and they would come over and run over and be all scared, and then they finally understood that no, I'm part of the team too. And I think
Yeah.
it goes a long way with this culture because you're not the first one that's talked about Mike emptying the trash. Right. I mean, Mike's complained about it. He said, you can't find good help anymore. These damn kids. I got to take out the trash. No, but like not being above it, like you talked about. It's
Yeah.
really
And
important.
it's
But
motivating too, because then you're like, oh shit, what other trash cans are full, and I gotta get,
yes,
I gotta do it.
yeah,
And it's good modeling for the interns right now. Like if there's a staff member ahead of me and like you can tell the bench bars are all 35s and they should be 45s, you start doing one and then other people start doing the same thing. And it's just because it's the right thing to do.
yeah. You mentioned being where your feet are, and I think that's a really important concept for young coaches because they want to get to the dessert before they eat their dinner, right? And they want to kind of get those after 2 or 3 years, feel like, okay, I'm ready to start teaching, or like you and I were talking about in the earlier, people promoting like a mentorship or a product. It's not time yet. You
Hmm.
don't have that experience, and you could always tell those people too because they don't have those answers when a situation comes up, when somebody's coming in and like, why is this important? Why am I doing this? And if you can't answer that, all of those questions, you're not ready to be teaching other coaches, and I think that's
Right.
important, to kind of put that time in and be where your feet are. I think it's really important because I think the best people, the best coaches, the people we've learned from have all done it. They all say the same damn thing. Hey, take out the garbage. And if you read the E-Myth, I think Michael Gerber talks, the E-Myth Revisited, Michael Gerber talks about before you open your business, he's like, be the busboy. And you know what you're doing? You're writing a manual on how to take the garbage out, how to replace right? Because that's how you write a manual. You put yourself in every role to know what the standards are. So I think it's really important to kind of look into that piece of it and say, yeah, I need to do everything in here and not be above it. Love it. Change those sheets.
And a lot of opportunities come from that, right? Like because you're the person who's, you know, running in traffic, so you're gonna get hit in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. In a good way. And I think and to finish up on what Kevin said about you're invested in making the adult program great. So, they see that, right? And then also willing to share ideas, really important. You're not, and try new stuff because you talked about being above taking the garbage out, but you're also being above being wrong. I did a podcast or something for Mike a long time ago, where I got a bunch of coaches to call in and say, I said, what did you learn from Mike Boyle? What's one thing you've learned from Mike Boyle? And I sent it to Mike. And so one of the thing I said was Mike gave me the permission to be wrong, to tell my clients that, hey, I was wrong about that. Because I remember in the early days when Stuart McGill came out, I was like, you shouldn't be doing crunches and sit-ups, and here's why, the discs and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, Jesus, I've been doing sit-ups and crunches. So I would have felt like, oh, I'm not saying anything. I'm just going to slow. But Mike was the one who really, because Mike had always like, hey, this is we're changing because we found out more information. So I would say to my clients, hey, listen, I know we've been doing sit-ups and I know we've been throwing the ball or Russian twists or whatever, but I'm becoming educated. I went to that conference and I learned some stuff this weekend, and I don't think it's the best thing, and I think we should change. And here's what we're going to do moving forward. I would have never done that without Mike because I was I didn't want it. I wanted, it was always about me, right? I would have thought about me. It's not about me, it's about them. So to your point earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Good stuff. Well, Jess, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome. Mike talks about you so much, and those guys have nothing but great things to say about you. And I just love that you haven't been doing this that long, and your approach has been just such a great approach to this whole thing, thoughtful and mindful approach that it's helped you get to where you are, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, not everybody can get to, next is ownership. I don't know. Move over, guys. Well, Mike's so old that, he won't be doing this for too much longer. That's not true. He better be doing it for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your ideas about adult programming. Love what you're doing. Keep up the good work. And thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ant. I appreciate it.